And thanks for joining us as we cap off another busy week of all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. There's so much that's happened this week and the week before, and we've been here giving you context and analysis of it all. After the show, check out the Fox Local app where you can see every episode of The Pulse. We've heard from people who've actually binged the show, and we're grateful no matter how you watch us for making us your choice for political news in this great town. The Fed cuts its key interest rate, well, just a little. It's the first time this year, but Fed Chair Jerome Powell says it could go down even more. We're talking with elder law attorney and financial advisor Pat Simasko about how this could impact all of us. Plus, we're doing Inside AI. Expert Brent Yax is in Studio C with the latest involving regulation of the technology. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. And Republican Raczkowski and Democratic State Representative Kelly Breen debate the latest headlines, and there is so much to talk about. A loaded show, so let's kick things off by running through some of the big stories making news right now, beginning on Capitol Hill, where the Senate rejected competing measures to fund federal agencies when the new budget year starts October 1st. That increases the chance of a partial shutdown. Leaders on both sides blaming each other for the standoff. Democrats want to reverse those cuts to Medicaid that Republicans passed in the summer. Republicans say the Democratic proposals would drastically hike up spending. Both chambers are out of session next week because of a Jewish holiday, Rosh Hashanah. To the Trump administration's immigration crackdown, officials say they've arrested more than 400 people in a Chicago area operation. That operation launched less than 2 weeks ago. ICE officials say that figure includes arrests made by other federal agencies. They say there's no end date in sight, saying they'll continue to go after people as long as they need to until they believe this entire mission is successful. ICE launched a so-called Midway Blitz on the 8th. It's drawn concern from activists and immigrant communities. And Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr.'s new vaccine panel declines to recommend the COVID-19 shot for everybody this fall. Until now, they were recommended just like the flu shot. The shots also aren't recommended for high-risk populations, instead leaving it up to individuals to make that decision. The panel also urged the CDC to adopt stronger language around claims of vaccine risks. That's despite pushback from medical groups who say the shots have a proven safety record. To your money now, the Federal Reserve cut its key interest rate by a quarter point this week. And what's more, they implied they'd do it 2 more times this year. That's amid growing concern from the big bank about our nation's labor market. Powell has faced pressure from President Trump to lower those rates, but it's the first rate cut this year.
Like our policy has been doing the right thing so far this year. I think we were right to wait and see how tariffs and inflation and the labor market evolved. I think we're now reacting to, to the much lower level of job creation and other evidence of softening in the labor market and saying, well, those risks are maybe not fully balanced, but moving in the direction of balance now.
The Fed meets 2 more times. The next meeting is at the end of October. So this is expected to be good news for borrowers. But the question a lot of you may be asking is, hey, how does this impact me? I know my wife and I ask that question all the time. So I don't have the answers, but I know someone who does. Elder law attorney and financial advisor Pat Simasko, a great guy and a regular here on our program. And we thank you for joining us here on The Pulse tonight.
Thanks for having me, Roop.
All right, so here we go. This is interesting. He's looking to lower rates on loans. And this is a good thing for a lot of people because it basically locks in a lower rate on a loan that someone's interested in.
Yeah, so if you have like a home equity loan and it's an adjustable rate loan like we have and we're remodeling our house, that if the rates come lower, then we have a little bit more money in our pockets to go out and spend for doing other things for the house.
And so, I mean, this essentially is to spur the economy, right? To kind of make things better, incentivize people to go spend money.
Right, exactly. So back in the old days when the interest rates were really low, the markets were going up, the real estate markets were going up, and then all of a sudden the interest rates went up and it slowed down the real estate market. And we've noticed that houses are staying on the market a little bit longer. There's not as many houses being built right now. People are afraid of the tariffs. So at least there's some good news that the rates are starting to come down. They're not going to come down. No one's going to wake up on Monday and say, oh my God, let's go out and buy that big monster house. But it's a trend that they're going to be going down over the next few months.
And we'll talk about that in a moment, about some further cuts. But this basically means less restrictive rates. And that allows basically for people who say, hey, I wasn't planning on going for a loan. Maybe I can now, right?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on remortgaging my house. I wasn't planning out buying that next thing. I'm a business. I wasn't planning out buying new equipment. But I think now that I'm at least going to start looking for that type of stuff.
What does this do for businesses out there? Because obviously everything trickles down to business on Main Street.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear out there with the tariffs and how's that going to affect their cash flow and how much cash that they have. So now there's some good news that the interest rates are coming down. The stock market's been doing great, that they can go out and look at some new equipment and maybe hiring some new people. A lot of new hirees out of colleges. My son's going to be graduating. He's nervous about getting a job. So hopefully they'll free up some of the job market as well.
How quickly do you think this stuff takes to move in the direction of what you're saying? Like if your son's out there and he's like, okay, you know, I'm a little nervous about a job. This is news from the last couple of months. But when does this change the trajectory for people like him?
Well, it's funny because you talk about Medicaid. When we talked before, I said, hey, you're going to wake up on Monday with the same Medicaid benefits that you have. When you wake up on Monday, there's going to be no brand new jobs sitting out there. It's the trend that's going to be happening. So slowly, next rate cut, few more jobs. So in the home equity loans, it's going to be right away. New mortgages will be down the line, jobs maybe next year, hopefully.
I don't know if this is a correct metaphor. You're the financial guy, not me. But I kind of think about when they say we're thinking about doing two more, like a patient who's laying in a hospital bed and they have an IV and they're saying we're going to increase something, dosage of something as we head towards next week. Let's see how you do with this one. Is that what it's like?
Kind of. Yeah, it's coming and you're going to start looking. So you're going to look for a house. Well, let's start looking. Oh, the rates are coming down a little bit more. And you keep looking at more. Oh, the rates are coming down a little bit more. If you look at for refinancing, you're going to save $60 a month on your mortgage. It may not be enough, but maybe next year it'll be $260 or that you save on your mortgage. And at that point, it would be worth refinancing, freeing up a little money.
So more cuts are on the way, and we understand that they're saying that. So talk about the math and the psychology behind that. What are they doing right now? Why are they waiting? What are they going to do?
So the problem is this, it's twofold. The lower interest rates that you have, that the higher inflation can go. And inflation's about 3%. They want to get it down to 2%. But the other focus is on the job market. So they're focusing on that to get more people working. And hopefully they're going to focus on that first and worry about the inflation later. So it's that balancing act right now.
Well, we're going to keep watching this very carefully, and we'll keep depending on you to give us some perspective. I wonder, though, if President Trump called Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, and gave him an attaboy for actually doing this. This is something the president wanted for a while, right?
So it's funny because he was demanding that he cut the rates. He was going to fire him for not cutting the rates, and now they cut the rates. And my wife is worried that it wasn't a big enough cut. So it's
what, to save Jerome Powell's job, you mean, or just in general?
That's what he was saying. That no, I don't think he's that they're supposed to be independent, right?
That's
so
right.
It's completely independent. But he did it out of the benefit of the job force to get more people working.
That's right.
It wasn't. Hopefully not political.
No. Well, obviously, it seems like all things have some political nature to it, but this is, as you say, an independent board that's supposed to do things in the best interest of the economy. And hopefully this rate cut is exactly that. We thank you, Pat Simasko, for joining us here on The Pulse.
So much.
Always great to see you.
I'll be here.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel's off the air, and it's something that still has so many of you talking. It has our all-star panel talking, too. Republican Raczkowski and Democratic State Representative Kelly Breen debate that and a whole lot more. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel, the budget battle in D.C. and Lansing, and a whole lot more in Studio C. Democratic State Representative Kelly Breen, and live via Zoom on Mackinac Island, former Republican House Majority Leader Raczkowski. It's good to see you both. We thank you both for joining us. Let's get right into this.
Good evening.
Rocky, we'll begin with you. What is your take? And, you know, I like this about you. You are an unapologetic conservative, but you don't. You also see both sides. And I want to ask you, when you look at this situation with Kimmel, and we can all agree that what he said was terrible and vile, the consequence of that, how do you think that's been handled by this administration and by the FCC?
Well, I'm not sure if you can actually lay it at the forefront of the FCC or this administration. It's the ultimate arbiter of that decision was ABC and Disney Corporation. And they were the ones that basically told Jimmy Kimmel that he's suspended indefinitely. Now, when you look at his ratings were actually less than or worse than the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which actually got the axe, as you remember, about 2 months ago. So, we talk a lot about FCC, but the FCC can mention certain things and suggest certain things, but it's up to the employers to make the final.
But the employers, Rocky,
group and one other group,
the employees, Rocky, in this particular situation, the parent companies are doing deals with the FCC that requires, I guess you could say, the favor of the FCC in order to get a green light on some of the deals. We know that, the company that you're talking about here that owns 27 stations, they obviously have an interest in making sure that the FCC they're in good standing with them in order to approve a merger. ABC has the same thing. You don't think that played any role?
Well, again, that's conjecture. We need to find out what the truth is from them. And until we find out from them, we're just talking heads here. Let's stick with the facts. The facts were Jimmy Kimmel's on indefinite suspension by ABC Disney or Disney ABC. And the reason was that they said was his comments. And his comments were pretty grotesque, as you started off at the beginning. They were uncalled for. They weren't funny for a late night funny show.
No, they weren't. They weren't. And there have been many people who've made comments that have been abhorrent and awful on television, unfortunately, the world we live in. But when you hear that, Representative Breen, right away, what goes through your mind? I mean, again, we're talking about, as he said, it would be conjecture to say that that's the reason. However, that's kind of what's taken over the narrative of people saying, no, that is the reason, is because these companies were trying to curry the favor of the FCC.
I think what we are seeing over the course of this administration is a systemic attack on the First Amendment, whether it is freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And this is unfortunately a latest in the string of efforts that we have seen to curtail the president's critics. And so what we are having now is a chilling effect on free speech. And I do agree with Rocky in that it ultimately is the employer's decision. He's right on that. However, when you have an administration that is bullying these media companies into bending to the administration's will, then it is a direct attack of the government on free speech. So there is the court of law, and then there's the court of public opinion. Whether or not you think that Jimmy Kimmel said was abhorrent or not, whether or not you think it was right or not, it is still his right to say it. And if the government is taking action to ensure that what he is saying can't be said on the air, that is blatantly attack on the First Amendment.
Rocky, when you hear
Kelly, it's absolutely, listen, Kelly, it's absolutely his right to free speech. It's not his right to have free airwaves. That's up to his employer, like you discussed. And it's sweet to hear my dear friend, who's a Democratic leader in the State House, talk about an administration that overreached, when you didn't talk about the Obama or the Biden administration that has done way more, not just on controlling air and airwaves of radio and TV, but also, and I apologize, we got a helicopter for Secretary Noem flying all over. I apologize. But I got to tell you that it's sweet to hear someone talk about an administration. This administration has been more hands-off than the Biden administration and the Obama administration.
But Rocky, in this case, you do have people, listen, you have terrible things being said on airwaves all the time, and it's unfortunate. We had a cable news host just talk about killing homeless people if they don't want to fall in line. That you would think that would be a comment that would draw the same kind of ire from conservatives and Democrats, but it doesn't seem to have the same effect as Kimmel.
And I'm going to have to interject here. When you look, I said it was a systemic thing. We are looking at everything from Jim Costas to kicking a certain media network out of the Oval so that there's no press access by a particular media outlet. And we are talking about him suing the New York Times over what he claims is false statements, and they are not. And as a public figure, he has a higher standard to reach in order to prove that there's been slander or libel. We are talking about how he sued 60 Minutes over because he didn't like how an interview went. So this president is very unfortunately.
The courts ruled for him. The courts ruled. Listen, the courts ruled on his behalf, his administration's behalf, and not all of those judges were appointed by Republicans. They were also appointed by Democrats.
Rocky, and you're right, they did. In this point, though, that Representative Breen is making, do you have any agreement at all with the fact that perhaps this hands-off feeling that you're proposing this administration has had on the media is perhaps a bit short-sighted?
No, it's absolutely not. This administration is taking the right approach. I don't see that again. Until all the facts are laid out, and until you ask Nexstar Media or Sinclair Media or ABC if the administration played heavy on with this decision or pushed this decision, and quite frankly, when you look at the evidence, it's not there. It's not there. And again, I ask people, look at the history. The Biden administration, the Obama administration did much more than the Trump administration is doing right now to clean up the airwaves.
I don't see any history of
I'm a big
Biden
fan.
or Obama
I'm a big fan
getting
of
somebody
First
fired.
Amendment.
Hold on 1 second, Rocky. Go ahead. What were you saying, Representative?
I don't recall any instance.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Well, you were saying you don't see
Absolutely, they did it. Now we
instances of
find out
them
the truth.
putting their hands around the media.
I don't see them saying at any point ever, we don't like how this interview went. We don't like your coverage of this topic. We don't like your coverage of this issue. And then you have Pam Bondi going out there and saying that hate speech isn't protected. Unfortunately, though, hate speech is protected. You have the right to say it. And so when an administration...
Well, no. You don't have the First Amendment right to hate speech when it affects or hurts individuals. For example, the Supreme Court many years ago said you can't scream fire in a crowded movie theater.
That's
and the reason for that is
hate speech is protected
where it harms other individuals.
Rocky, I understand that when you hurt someone, right? That's different.
No,
but at a college campus, this has been adjudicated time and time again.
Correct.
College campuses have said awful things like River to the Sea and other things that have been perceived as threats, but they still were permitted. They were still permitted even though it was hate speech, right? So that's something important to keep in mind. Look,
again, but please understand what Pam Bondi was actually talking about. She was talking about the hate speech that actually incites violence. There's a difference between hate speech or an individual's right to expression.
Inciting speech is different from hate speech.
Well, yes, inciting speech is different than hate speech, and we have a lot of things to sort through when it comes to this topic, and we just started to scratch the surface. But Rocky, I know you're busy right there at that conference, that leadership conference. Thanks for your time. Representative Breen, always good to see you. Thank you as well.
Thank you. Good to see you, Kelly.
Good to see both of you.
Take
We're
care.
going inside AI next on The Pulse. Brent Yax talks about possible regulations on the technology. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. This is The Pulse. Joining us now is Brent Yax, the Awcom CEO. He's an artificial intelligence expert here to talk to us about something that's been on so many people's minds after what happened in Washington, where parents were testifying in front of lawmakers saying, hey, something needs to be done to further regulate AI. And one of those sets of parents was actually very sad because they lost their child because of something that happened online. And Brent Yax joins us now to talk about that. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thanks for having me, Roop.
This situation where a young man took his own life, it is being blamed in part on AI. Talk about what happened there.
Yeah, of course, it's tragic, right? And what we know is that this individual had leveraged AI for sort of a therapeutic use, right? They were using it as a counselor. They were using it to get advice. They were creating sort of a relationship with it. I believe the parents are actually suing that company now as well because of it. But of course, when they testified in Washington, they brought up the story and how this works. And what it shed light on is the fact that there are a huge subset of people that are actually leveraging some of these technologies in a similar fashion for a therapeutic sense.
You know, I find it very interesting, especially since my wife is a mental health therapist. And oftentimes when, people see clients in that space, there are cues that you can kind of look at. It's not necessarily what is said or written down, but it's something that you feel. And the fear that so many people have, including people in the therapy world, is that we're losing that sensibility, thinking that everything can be taken care of by AI. This could be an example of that.
I think it's an exact example of that. And in fact, it's almost a perfect example because one of the things AI can't do, doesn't do, and not even close to doing is be humanistic. Yeah. It doesn't have the ability to do that. So like you're saying, it can't see those underlying issues. It can't see maybe warning signs. It can't see, how to diagnose somebody. It's just trying to make somebody happy by responding in a way that it thinks they want. And that's all it can do.
These relationships that young people and people who are older develop with AI, it can be joked about in sitcoms. People can tease people about it, laugh about it, that's your only friend. But in fact, that is an issue. Talk about regulations and what is in the works right now and what could be in the works.
Well, right now, federally speaking, there's not much in the works besides just discussions. We've had the testimonies that happened over the last week. Within the last few weeks, we've had a meeting on AI in healthcare. We've had a meeting on AI in Veterans Affairs. So the conversation's starting, but as we've talked before on the show, there's a number of regulations that have been stuck in Washington over the last few years without any movement. So as a number of people, and even Kelly had mentioned earlier, that some of this has to be solved by the states, and Michigan has to get involved and push some stuff through.
And I know Representative Breen, who was just on this show, actually talked about the fact that there is legislation in the works, at least in the Michigan House, to make something happen here. Because I've heard from many people on the national level who say, look, everything can't be a federal controlled issue. At some point, the state has to get involved. What kind of regulations do you hope to see to help secure this really fascinating and really helpful technology, but that can also hurt?
We just need guardrails. We need to understand what AI is good at and what it's bad at. And when we talk about therapy, when we talk about interactions with people, it's very bad at it. So we need to set some guardrails around what it can be used for, what it can't be used for, what the notification has to be, and are there ways to step in if we see something going wrong and moderate that? We just don't have any of that right now.
And that is really, really important. And obviously, anybody who ever feels like they need some help out there because of a mental health issue, they can always call 988. That is the most important number for you and your family to know about. But the bottom line also right now is that something needs to be done legislatively. Those hearings in Washington in earnest began that conversation, and in Lansing, as we're hearing, conversations as well. Let's hope for some activity. Brent Yags, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you, Rup.
That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Rup Raj. As always, it was great to be with you.